En séance publique. Donc,
so we go back in public. So I will say shortly what I had to say earlier about acoustic incidents. So take this little card on the table and you'll see what you should be doing. We want to be careful and as much as possible, one microphone on at a time. So we'll resume where we were at our last meeting. So we are on Mr. Beaulier's motion, and I'll put it in context, and Mr. Sanson's motion on the motion of Mr. Beaulier. So I had a list. So Mr. Royce, Mr. Sanson, Mr. Godin, and I will add Mr. Beaulier. So Mr. Boyce, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here today, once again. Thursday morning was the first time I was here with this committee because this committee is a very important one for all Canadians, of course for the Francophone community, but also, I believe, for minority communities, English-speaking minority communities.
Le président et des...
Just before, Chair, I just would like to remind colleagues, I think it's a good thing to discuss the context of this motion presented by Mr. Sanson. But just before I begin, I hope that all my colleagues have had an excellent weekend with their families, with their fellow citizens. And Mr. Chair, in my riding, we have a festival. It was the 90th anniversary of our Apple Blossom Festival, which is an opportunity to celebrate our agricultural heritage. So I'd like to thank all volunteers, all those who were involved in the festival, because it's a very important one for our communities in Nova Scotia. Now, of course, I was busy this weekend, but I did have a few hours to reconsider Thursday's interventions, and I'd like to add a few points. And also, I'd like to add some points to what I said on Thursday. And I have another 10 or 11 points concerning the amending motion, Mr. Sanson's motion. I want to make sure that what I have to say is in order, because the text of the motion and the debate on Mr. Drouin's remarks are there, but I think perspectives of all members from all parts of the country are important. We know that Mr. Serret comes from the north of Ontario. Mr. Sanson, what he has to say is also important. So, first of all, you will remember, Chair, my family connection with French, because I am an example. When I came here, when I came to Parliament, my abilities in speaking French were quite poor. But today, I'm sitting on a committee, parliamentary committee, where it's possible for me to express myself in French. I called my uncle over the weekend to make sure that my family history, the Blois family history, was correct. And, Chair, before this public meeting, we had a conversation with respect to our connection with the Vikings through Normandy. because, of course, Blois is a city in France, a town in France. And in the north of France, the Vikings were present. They were present throughout Europe, England, Scotland, but France as well. And the first people called Blois in North America were connected, had a French connection, and through that, and even through the Normans, the Norman conquest of England. So I do have a connection to the Vikings, and I'm not sure, Chair, but I'm very proud of my connection to France and to the French language. And the first Blois who came to North America, the first one was Abraham Blois, or Blois, and he was a soldier in the British Army. But I haven't explained how he got his land, how he acquired his land in Nova Scotia. After the War of Independence in the United States, the Blois decided to give their land to veterans. Mr. Beaulieu, I think I can guess what you might be wanting to say. Well, I have nothing against this gentleman talking about his origins, but, well, Mr. Beaulieu, I was just about to mention the same thing. You were saying, Mr. Blois, you were discussing your attachment to the French language, and then you tended to veer off into your origins. So we're on the amendment to the motion. Yes, thank you, Chair. And I am sitting here as a substitute at this committee, but I believe that Mr. Beaulieu as well likes stories in certain contexts, so it's very important for French and my connection to French and to Nova Scotia. So I'll get back quickly. Yes, after the War of Independence, the first Blois in North America, Abraham and Sarah, they gave certain parcels of land. They owned certain parcels of land in Nova Scotia, and for most Blois, and this was a rather rare family surname, but there were several Blois in Nova Scotia. Just want all of the details to be here, to be available to the committee. Ms. Stubbs, I think this is connected to this motion because the motion presented, I believe, by Mr. Godin and then Mr. Beaulieu is a personal attack. It's a bit of a piece of bickering. And in the Natural Resources Committee, when Bill C-49 was before the committee, the way in which the Conservatives made their comments about the bill were rather offensive. For me, someone from Nova Scotia, because the Prime Minister, or the Premiers rather, and the Prime Minister and Premier Fury knew of the text of this motion. If Mr. Godin and Mr. Beaulieu were in a majority, well, if they'd had the majority, it would have created a dangerous precedent, a very dangerous one. Because I may go to the Natural Resources Committee and call for Ms. Stubbs' head, because Ms. Stubbs was rather problematic, said something rather problematic for people in the Atlantic provinces. Now, I know there's a difference between the sensitivity of a question having to do with the French language, especially in Quebec, and also the economic aspirations of people in Atlantic Canada. But I'd like to add another thing that should be taken into consideration, and this for my Conservative colleagues. Do my colleagues remember of Ms. Thomas, the Conservative critic for Heritage? We had to find in French. We had to find the French for deer in headlights. You know that expression, Mr. Arsenault, deer in headlights. Because when Mr. Martin asked Ms. Thomas a question, he said, do you believe in the importance of public broadcasters? Ms. Thomas, they translated as in shock. She was like a deer in headlights. I think it took 20 seconds before the question was answered and that was dangerous because we know just how important Radio-Canada is for Francophone communities, in particular in Quebec. And it was extraordinary, Mr. Chair. It took 20 seconds. It might have been a good idea for everyone to get to the Heritage Committee and present a motion asking for Ms. Thomas to step back from the committee. It might also have been a good thing that Mr. Poilievre could have done, something Mr. Poilievre could have asked, since she was the critic for the Conservatives. When asked a question about the public broadcaster for the Francophone community, it's also important in for the Anglophone community. But in this context, with this committee, Mr. Chair, where algorithms, where AI is at work, it wasn't a parliamentary report, but it was a report from a particular political institution where they concluded that the greatest threat was in the next 4 or 5 years is that it would be impossible for people to understand what was real and what was fake.
Exactement à ce moment-là.
And it's exactly at this point, of course, that we have to recommit and invest in the public broadcaster. And for my colleagues, NDP, for the Conservatives, for the Bloquistes, to recognize this as a precedent. We will have other opportunities to use that as a tool or as a weapon and attacking other colleagues, other parliamentary colleagues. But that's another consideration. Now, as opposed to Radio-Canada or CBC, Radio-Canada is very important. When I'm in Ottawa to come here to work, it's very easy to get my information, my news here. But if I'm in Nova Scotia, it's hard to get those news. Radio-Canada, I put it on in the car when I'm traveling between here and my offices, at home and my office. We're here today to debate another day of this motion, which is a personal attack on a colleague And I think we're wasting parliamentary time completely. It's great. It's a good situation in which I can discuss important issues, but for everyone else who's sitting here, we have to take a look at the fact that we have a lot of other important issues for the stakeholders. Now, there's the International Congress of Acadians coming up. You're aware of the history, of course, and I've got to thank you for all your work on that, because it's good to have you as a Liberal member of the Liberal caucus for Nova Scotia. You will recall, I'm sure, Mr. Cormier, we had to write a letter to the CEO, Catherine Tate, CEO of Radio-Canada of CBC, because it was significant enough an issue for his writing as well. It's really, an international Congress, and it's going to be reported on Radio-Canada, hopefully in his writing as well. My colleague from Outremont. This is how we promote the use of the French language outside of Quebec. In Quebec, of course, but also elsewhere, like in my region, for example. So I have to share that perspective with my colleagues here in our Official Languages Committee. Now, I don't want to be repetitive, but we heard a lot about this on Thursday, and I believe that Madame Coucy, there's a connection there. There was a bit of a problem. A lot of mics were open at the same time, and a lot of crosstalk. So I have to tell you this situation, the anecdote, if you will, of Grand Pré. A lot of people from there were attending, if you wish, virtually at our affairs. Grand Pré is a lovely place, historical for the Francophone community. Mr. Godin, yeah? No? You disagree? Oh. No, it's okay. Minor correction, if you will. When I last spoke, I gave you details of the Acadian experience. Of course, the International Congress is very important to them. But, the exile, the expulsion of the Acadians in 1755, Ms. Coucy, and it probably just unintentionally, the planters. These individuals were loyalists in the Americas, in the United States. Now, after the 7-Year War, they decided to join with the Loyalists and occupy the territory. But in my writing, Sainte Croix, I will find Grand Pré, of course, and the older established names in these Acadian communities. But they were expulsed. They were deported out of their territory in Acadia. And just a small point. Mr. Beaulieu would be pleased to hear that I agree with Bloch on at least one point. This expulsion order that was enacted in 1755 is found at Fort Edward today, a historical site in my writing as well, at Fort Edward. Fort Edward is a national park. And Mr. Bergeron, I believe, has written a letter to Minister Thibault, responsible for Park Canada, to encourage an increase of financial resources to improve and update the exhibits at Fort Edward. And of course, I concur with that decision entirely. Thank you to the Bloc for pushing for better resources for Nova Scotia. But it's also of great importance to maintain that French connection. And if you'd like to send me, you can transmit that message on my behalf as well. Thank you. In 2012, fastball was being played in Saint-Jean in Dominique Vignet's writing. The Canadian Championship for fastball and the importance. To have this activity occur in a French area, a French village. Everyone there speaks French. I think 98% of the population is francophone. But there's a few important figures. Mr. John Roy. He is the principal of a school. And he's an important character in this story. He has two sons, Matthew and Joshua, and one is a pitcher, and he's the only Quebec individual, Nachua, the pitcher. I wanted to cite him so that I could find his name in the answer. Anyway, Chair, once again with this motion proposed by Mr. Beaulieu and amended by Mr. Sanson, would make it impossible for the other work of the study to carry on. Post-secondary education study. I'll try to provide another element of the context which is important. The Standing Committee on Official Languages has a very significant role to play for individuals outside of Quebec, because the motion deals directly with the Quebec presence in that. And very important for the leadership of the federal government to encourage people to invest and resources for Francophone communities, and of course for Anglophones who are in fact Francophiles. So, I took my schooling at Hanson School, high school in Nova Scotia. It's in a rural area. And two teachers figure high, Miss Como and Trevor Como. two of my teachers who are mentors and who are figure large in my my life, and they follow the doings of this committee, and they check out how I'm doing, and they continue to encourage me to improve my French. Now, after this motion, after this debate, once we have concluded on this thing, I would hope that all my colleagues would consider that the other recommendations and transmit our recommendations to have a greater presence in the Francophone areas throughout Canada. But of course, post-secondary, because I began my courses in French here in 2019. Of course, the pandemic came along, and for me, it was serendipitous because I had the opportunity to get 2 extra hours of teaching during the pandemic to practice my French with a professor made available by the House of Commons. And I continue to this day. François Bélanger, I would like to recognize, Elizabeth Harvey, 2 professors from the University of St. Anne French Department. It's a small college, a university college in southwest Nova Scotia. So I greet them today. Hello, I hope everything is going well. The parliamentary... Oh, I think I have the motion before me here. Yes, and no. I'm returning back to the motion. Yes, okay. I have 10 other points to make specifically on the language, the expressions, the turn of phrase, and these motions. But the Assembly, the Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Francophonie, is a very significant organization, and it is very significant. Mr. Drouin was the chair of that. He's also parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Agriculture. He's a great colleague, but he is the international chair of that assembly. I've had several opportunities to discuss the significance and the importance of this organization. And it's particularly for the promotion of the French language and the geographic spread of where French is spoken. Now, the part of the motion presented by Mr. Beaulieu is a bit redundant because Mr. Joancy is representing Glengarry Prescott Russell and chair of that committee. A majority of the colleagues APF voted in favor of Mr. Drouin. He was elected in good order, and their work is not finished. That organization, the APF, Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, colleagues have to recognize the importance of that organization on 2 issues particularly. There's a war going on in Eastern Europe, and in Ukraine particularly, and the Francophone Assembly are having some difficulties there. So we have to try to organize to bring all the points of view and have a solid position on that to support their concerns. And in that particular forum, we discuss the efforts being made by the Russian Federation to distract and mislead the population, misinformation, disinformation, and outright false information. I've held a town hall on my riding, and I'm there to discuss with them. It was absolutely stunning to see these citizens. President Zelensky was a Nazi during the Second World War. Well, that's crazy. Obviously not. But that's disinformation from Russia. That's Moscow-led. Well, I think you'll know why I'm raising the point. We should come back to the meat of the matter and the substance of our motion, please. Monsieur Blois, please. You said you wanted to check out the wording here, the motion, and now you've wandered off a little bit off the track now. So please make a solid link with this motion, and you may carry on. Yes, you're in a very difficult position because I'm the chair of the Agriculture Committee, and it's not black and white, and I know the difficulty of casting decisions to a committee, for a committee. But disinformation is a fact. It exists. And it's important for colleagues to have that conversation, to have a strategy to combat that problem. Also in the African context, as we know, there's been a rise, une montée, augmentation, of the Chinese presence in Africa. North Korea also, Iran, also and other authoritarian regimes is a threat to our Western nations. They want to create more influence in Africa. And the Francophonie is a good counterweight and would encourage better links, better communication with their friends in America. And I'm very proud of the work that has been done by our colleague, Mr. Drouin, as the chair of that assembly. It's very rare for a Canadian to hold such a position, particularly for an MP from outside of Quebec.
I expect that our fellow citizens in Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, I expect that they're very proud of their MP, especially for his work internationally. I need my notes here. Once again, the importance in the geopolitical context, it's important for all members to understand this point. Good. Okay. I will get back specifically to my points one at a time. And that's why I have my laptop here, because I have a definition. For the record, Chair, I think for all Canadians, so that everyone can understand the motion, I'm going to read the motion for the record. presented by Mr. Beaulieu. Given the obscene and offensive comments made by the Liberal MP for Glengarry Prescott Russell to a witness defending the cause of the French language in Quebec, the committee report to the House, that the chief, or rather report to the House that the chief government whip and member of the Liberal leadership team immediately remove MP Francis Drouin from the Standing Committee on Official Languages, and B, that MP Francis Drouin resign as the chair of the Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, Canadian section. So, with Mr. Sanson's amendment, he proposes that the report be tabled in the House, and then point A and a part of point B that MP Francis Drouin resign as the chair. The APF has already voted for Mr. Drouin, so it's quite correct that my colleague. What riding? The member for Sackville, Chesapeake. A great defender of the people in his riding. First of all, the word in English is obscene. I think it's the same in French. What is the definition of that word, Chair? According to Google, and today during oral questions, I found this, and perhaps my other colleagues, can find another definition, but overall obscene, concerning the representation or description of sexual subjects that are offensive or disgusting given present norms of morality. For example, an obscene joke. Now, I've already explained that Mr. Drouin's comments were not appropriate, but he did apologize. In the context of this motion and the word obscene, the first part of this description of Google's, the representation or description of sexual subjects, I think that no, that Mr. Drouin is, where this is concerned, no, he hasn't done anything here. But having offensive to public morals or repugnant, well, it would be necessary for me, Mr. Speaker, given that I represent Kings Hants. There are two counties in my riding. There's Kings and Hants. And once again, in the context of the parliamentary session, I don't think this would hold. But in communities in my riding, if I'm there with people, especially in Hants, you know, if I'm talking with the guys, no, I mean, I agree with the problem of Mr. Drouin's having used a given word in Parliament. But in the context of communities, you know, we're talking with the guys or with people in my riding, it's perhaps not perfectly acceptable, but it's sometimes the way people talk in my riding. I think it's necessary for all colleagues here to, I think it's appropriate to question whether obscene is the proper word. I think it's perhaps a bit too strong Obscene, really? I don't know. Offensive. Offensant in French. Offensive in, is offensant the proper pronunciation? According to Google, offensant or offensive means, and they give three examples: to act in such a way that someone feels deeply wounded, hurt, or angered, where his allegations are deeply offensive for us. That's an example. This might be closer to the mark than obscene. The second, actively aggressive, for example, an offensive against people engaged in an insurrection, and then an offensive campaign, no. I think in the case of Mr. Drouin, I listened to the exchanges with, I think it was 2 witnesses, and I think they also say, where they say where someone feels deeply hurt, upset, or angered. But if it was an attack, it was an attack on the witness's opinion. I'm not trying to protect Mr. Drouin. I think, along with Mr. Beaulieu, and I agree, about including offensive in this context. So I agree with Mr. Beaulieu here. But in English, because my mother tongue is English, Chair, it says comments, plural in English, and commentaire, singular, in French. And I think the committee might want to consider that it should be comment. It shouldn't be in the plural in English. And I won't repeat this for Ms. Kusi, or for the other members of the committee. I think it shouldn't be les commentaires with an S, but it should be, I think, there was one inappropriate exchange. I'd like my colleagues to think about this point. And I will continue with my compliments for my colleague, the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell, because I work closely with him on other committees. And like me, Mr. Drouin represents a rural riding, and it's also the case with you. Chair, Madawaska Restigouche, I believe that's your riding, but Glengarry Prescott Russell, because with this motion, if it is supported by a majority on this committee, would create a precedent. It would be a personal attack on a member. And I think that we need to raise certain points about Glengarry Prescott Russell. What's the situation on the ground in Glengarry Prescott Russell? I did some research for a few hours, some research on the riding. 60% of the population of the riding is Francophone. I think that in Ontario, I think it's the highest concentration or percentage of people who speak French in a riding in Quebec. And the citizens, I learned that the citizens there are very proud of their identity in Glengarry Prescott Russell. And I looked into the communities in this riding. There's Lochberry. It's the home of the Hawks, a junior hockey team, very well known. There's Castleman, another town in Glengarry, Prescott Russell, L'Oreal, Rundgren, Rockland, Saint Isidore, and my favorite, because I visited it with Mr. Drouin a few years ago, Saint Albert, and I forgot the name of the cheese business. It's called La Fromagerie, the cheese makers. But it's such a lovely place. And the people involved in making cheese are well aware of the importance of their institutions. So for a rural MP in Ontario, in Eastern Ontario, with 60% of the population speaking French, in a province where, for the most part, people speak English, I think that we should consider the people who Mr. Drouin represents. Very proud people. And he is a great defender of the French language in the context of Quebec, but also in his writing in Ontario. And he has put forward initiatives on ways to promote French in Ontario and Quebec. So that's about Glengarry Prescott Russell. Chair, I think there was a witness, and I think once I watched the video and the exchange between Mr. Drouin and the witness who was present by video conference, I think there was not just one witness, there were two. So it's problematic. This motion is problematic because I would think that Mr. Beaulieu would mention that it wasn't just one witness, but two. Well, when I've heard from other colleagues, I might present a sub-amendment. We also have to make sure that grammar is correct as well as the context. So we spent a lot of time on this. We have to make sure that the text of the motion and the amendment is correct. So, Chair, and this may be my last point, maybe, possibly, we'll see. Well, there's Mr. Sanson, and I know that it's important to listen to Mr. Sanson. I often listen to him, hear him speak in the Atlantic Caucus, and if colleagues think that my interventions are boring, well, they're in for a treat. That the committee report on its conclusions, on its findings, rather, to the House. I think it's necessary, Mr. Chair, to consider the ramifications involved if this part of the motion is passed, because I expect that the Bloc Québécois will rise in the House if this is adopted, and this will lead to another vote in the House of Commons. This will take even more parliamentary time up in the House of Commons. I think we're the 3rd of June today, I think we have perhaps 2, perhaps 3 weeks remaining in our session. So we should be considering the various bills and initiatives before the House. There's Bill C-64. What is that bill? Well, it's with our friends from the NDP, we will be creating in Canada for the first time. How do you say framework? A cadre réglementaire, a regulatory framework funded publicly. And this is history. This is history making. We have to move this bill forward. If Mr. Beaulieu and Mr. Godin and the other Conservatives succeed, well, if Mr. Godin's fellow citizens, if Mr. Beaulieu's fellow citizens want to debate this motion, I believe that their fellow citizens, I believe that all our fellow citizens would rather have pharmacare rather than this bickering. That's one bill before the House. What are the other bills before the House? There is the budget. We are going to build more housing in Canada, and I know that Mr. Beaulieu doesn't like my stories, but just a short story here. It's in connection with the motion. When I was elected in 2019, there was housing available in my riding, but after the pandemic, things became really difficult because there were more than 50,000 people in Ontario, or more than 500,000, who decided to 50,000 who decided to relocate to the Maritimes, to my province, among others. And we have a plan to create more housing, but we have to have the necessary budget measures in the budget. And the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives think that the best use of our time would be to take this motion, an attack on Mr. Drouin, a political squabble, and bring this before the House of Commons. And how do you say, instead of?
Plutôt que, au lieu de, rather than discuss housing. Well, perhaps the electors in Alberta would find that housing is perhaps a higher priority than this motion, particularly given the context. When a committee adopts its report, one MP can raise a point of privilege or a point of order and seek to discuss this. I mean, the show is over. The Bloc is looking for their day in the sun, and that'll be over. Please, Mr. Chairman. It's absolutely essential to get back to essential work for this committee. And I'm sure that Mr. Sanson, but I have a few more points to make about this motion, but this is a part of my presentation. So on behalf of all our colleagues and the committee, it's absolutely essential that we get back to business of the committee. But if this personal attack continues, I'm prepared to continue improving my French in this committee with you right up to September. I'm quite prepared to raise issues. I'm a lawyer. Not as much experience as yourself, of course, but if required, I can find other points to work with this motion, and I will carry on. I will carry on until the Conservatives and the Bloc, and maybe even Mr. Boulouris, decide that this game is far from constructive for our Canadian electors. As an MP with years of experience, I'm not particularly proud of. I respect my colleagues in opposition, and this is just a dispute. Now, unless I'm wrong, he's the only NDP representative in Quebec. And I'm sure he's working diligently for the advancement of French in Quebec and elsewhere. Perhaps my final point, Mr. Chair. Well, for the time being, and after Mr. Sanson has the floor, I will raise my hand to get back on the list. But I think that Mr. Sanson is always prepared to talk about the French language and Francophone communities. He was once on the Acadian School Board in Acadie, and I'm quite proud, and I recognize the quality of his work. So now I would cede the floor to Mr. Sanson, and thank you very much for your patience, Mr. Chair, both for myself and all our colleagues. Okay, Mr. Sanson, Godin, Beaulieu, and Roux. Mr. Sanson, Deputy Sanson, you have the floor. Thank you, thank you. I certainly will take the opportunity to thank my colleague from Nova Scotia, who has demonstrated the importance of the French language, who wished to share his experience and history, both on the committee and in North America, in close collaboration with the motion and the sub-amendment. One thing I'd like to point out initially to my colleague, and it's in his riding that we find Grand Pré, where there was a wedding. I think you were there, Mr. Chair. We announced C-76, or C-13 rather. The announcement was made in that riding in Grand Pré, and we were very proud of that riding. And as he mentioned, the comments that he has shared with us are very, very impressive. He really did his research this weekend. He dug deep. And the presentation that he made a week ago, and he wanted to enrich his presentation and enlighten the committee. He added a lot of information, a lot of facts, a lot of data, which is quite important in our discussion that we've been having for the last few weeks. So I thank him for his work and for his French, which continues to improve and makes his professors proud of their success. because for any good teacher, of course, if a student succeeds, they can feel that they are partly responsible for that. I'm drawn by the fact that 7 years, 8 years, almost 9 years, that we composed the Official Languages Committee. I was there for the first 4 years, and I took on the role temporarily for the modernization of the Official Languages Act initiative, and for me, that was a high experience. I want to extend the hand to the opposition. I made a few comments a few weeks ago, perhaps, when I asked them to take a good look in the mirror. Yes, to look in the mirror and stop playing games and concentrate on the task in hand. Either they didn't look in the mirror or the mirror broke. But apparently they haven't changed opinion. I know that Mr. Dalton, Mr. Généreux, Ms. Cousy, Mr. Godin, they do want to get back on track with our work. They want to continue to advance the well-being of the French language. Now, we have a good toolbox, and we have tools in it. The commissioner was here a week ago. He explained the importance of buckling down to work. That we have to set aside these motions, which are not particularly useful. I think I explained a few weeks ago. Mr. Pierre Poilievre used a very inappropriate vocabulary in the House recently, and he did not apologize. It's not the word wacko that he used that was a problem, but rather the fact that he refused to withdraw or to apologize for using a word which is just not acceptable when applied in the most democratic institution in Canada, who has a responsibility that rules of procedure be followed in the House. And that gentleman, who represents the democratic institution here in Ottawa, asked him several times to withdraw his comments or apologize for those comments. And it just became another political game, another political drama. Now, my amendment seeks to move on to the next phase. Let's get back to work. Now, I don't know if it's clear to you, but these organizations in Canada that must communicate almost weekly, on a weekly basis, on the progress being made on C-13. They're very frustrated. All these organizations are quite frustrated because we are wasting minutes, hours, days for no conceivable reason. If they could only accept to get back to the work in hand, we could accomplish the objectives that are very, very important. What to do with, what happens with C-13 if we don't use it, if we don't accomplish, finalize it? No changes have been made for 35 years. That was the last time there were any revisions to that legislation. Even if indirectly they did, the Conservatives claim credit for that. It was Mr. Bouchard, in fact, that initiated a debate, an initiative in 2018. They were actually limiting the application of the law that was in existence, recognizing the advantages that would accrue to these communities, but not to the degree that he wished. And that was the birth of the Bloc. The Bloc was created because the Conservatives didn't have the backbone that they should have had to ensure the success and put some teeth to that act, to that law. Has it not been for the fact that the Conservatives did not really wish to support Francophone communities outside of Quebec, Mr. Bouchard would have stayed as a federal MP. He was a very dedicated person. He wanted to see the advancement of this bill. But the Conservatives thought this was too much. Now, maybe memory fails me, but I think it was in 82, it was Mr. Stéphane Dion who gave very clear, precise description of measures that would accomplish advantages to these communities in Canada by way of this law. Now, all of those proud organizations, all MPs around this table did, in fact, contribute to the debate at C13. Now, these associations are saying that it's stalled, that these MPs now don't want to follow through. They don't want to deal with the essentials of the changes to make sure that C13 goes ahead. I could give you my expression, my position that C13 recognizes for the first time in Canada the continuum. The continuum. The first time for those community groups, for these school boards, associations, this was an opportunity. An incredible opportunity. Not only in the education field, but post-secondary education as well. So we'll get a continuum from early childhood education right through to post-secondary education, the continuum. Everyone will benefit. Never has such a historic opportunity been at hand, but it's the Conservatives. And unfortunately, the other members of the opposition who don't want to implement C13. They don't want to allow post-secondary education to to get resources which would respond to their efforts to offer and improve their services. Early childhood education as well, which there was no connection. There was nothing there to help them. My father would say in the 60s, if only we could have a bilingualism act, we can request, insist on our services because we'll have the tools. It will give us the tools. Well, it's the same situation today. in 69, as in 69, and then prior to that in 39, and then in 59, and carry on, carry on. C-13 is a tool with immense potential, an opportunity to recapture a lot of lost ground, which we'd lost, but no, not interested in that discussion. No, don't want to look in the mirror, or look up to their boss and say, "Listen, this should come to an end. We were elected in our ridings to meet their needs, and they are asking us to get on with the business. Conduct these studies which will allow the advancement of education," and I don't know how many times I've repeated it. It's the key to success in our society. But no, they dig in their heels. Don't want to. No. Oh, can't do it. No. They can't look their boss in the eye and say, "You're not going to control this particular issue. We are. We are elected members." So that's enough wasted time. Wow. I just don't understand. I don't understand how we can ignore this opportunity for great progress. Everybody around the table recognizes the francophonie, but to waste this time so that we can't implement C-13, we're backsliding here. We're backsliding. We're losing ground. They're not in power, so they got all the answers right now. But when they get to power, they don't do anything to support Francophone communities. No one can tell you better and more truthfully than I where are the cuts going to come when they come into your ridings. It's the minority groups that are going to be the losers. You know, when there's less water in the lake, all the flora and fauna acts differently. They look at each other differently, and they don't look at each other as co-citizens. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. For 9.5 years, under the Harper regime, there was zero, not a black penny, of increase in the official languages plan. Zero. 9.5 years. 9.5 years. Is that an investment in the Francophonie? Is that going to assure progress? Absolutely impossible. You know as well as I do, inflation is running at 2 perhaps or more percent. We've gone up 20%.
So the Conservatives, no investments, and Liberals, over 8.5 years, have been investing. We have moved from $2.2 million. I repeat, just a moment, 2.2 billion. We increased this amount to 4.1, 1.9% increase. We almost doubled. Can you imagine? We almost doubled this amount, these investments over 8 years, investments that the Conservatives hadn't increased at all. So my colleague, Mr. Serret, has said this, and we often say it in the House. The Conservatives are just going to take out the chopping board. And where will they cut? They will cut programs for minorities. Now, my motion, or rather my amendment to the motion, asks that we get down to work, that we act. But what's happening? They don't want to. They're not even, they're not even interested because they want to play games. They want to keep on playing games. But this is hard because we accomplished in this committee was C13, and I think that the nadir of this committee is what we're doing now. It's what we're seeing now. We want to develop post-secondary schooling in French. Francophone school boards, which at the beginning of the 90s have, for the first time in Canada's history, they are in control of their destiny in education for the first time, because before they were under English language school boards. They were guided by others. And finally, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that, yes, the French school board should have complete control over their destiny. And in 1996, in Nova Scotia, they finally were able to create a Francophone school board that ensures the betterment, the progress of education in French. When I began, I think there were perhaps some 3,000 students, and now it's more than 6,000. Here again, almost doubled the number. And I remember there was a former Deputy Minister of Education in New Brunswick, I'm trying to remember his name. He told me he said that if things were to continue the way they had been going in Nova Scotia, there would no longer be any French. No one would speak French in Nova Scotia. Can you imagine the difference? And why the difference? The Bilingualism Act, the rise of Francophone school boards, the Charter in 1982. In 1988, modernization of the Act. And finally, we got C13, which provides the tools necessary to make progress. We said that this legislation would have to be revised every 10 years. And this would help to realize progress. If the Conservatives get into power, I predict that we will backslide. And no, there are concrete examples. This is very important. The first thing they'll do with C13 is that they'll say, we cannot accept that judges on the Supreme Court have to be bilingual. Even today, they're against it. They voted against it. They're still against it. And tomorrow, they will continue to be against it. Because they're not going to, because they don't want that to be. This is very significant. Already they're backsliding, and they will continue backsliding. What other party What else will they cut? Another way they can hurt C13 is to not fund it, because there is funding for C13 which will ensure progress. People in Treasury Board, they're saying it's Treasury Board that will decide, but then they'll refuse to provide the money. And then the Treasury Board won't be able to do its job. There'll be no more progress. There'll be backsliding, all kinds of ground lost. People are saying that each and every week, and they're asking us each and every week, please get back to the study on school boards. The school boards began in the 90s. That work. So it's been 35 years since they were founded. And they're dealing with real challenges. With time, they have run into challenges. And here, they have an opportunity to share with the community, with our committee, to share their issues. Thank you, Chair. I think we've been listening to the Liberals long enough. They're filibustering. And I think we should get back to the motion. I'd really like to get back to the topic at hand. Mr. Godin, if I understand what Mr. Sanson is doing, he's following up on what Mr. Blois said about reporting to the House. So now, we are not talking about this because we're talking about that. At least that's how I interpret things, Mr. Sanson. I'd like to bring you back to the motion. So please go ahead. Point of order. Yes, Mr. Serret. Mr. Chair, can we get back to our study of post-secondary schooling and of economic development? We have a report to do. We want to invite officials, senior officials. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not a point of order. Not a point of order. Now, I think that we can say that it is not a point of order. Listen, as we did in previous meetings, I'm going to adjourn, but subject to in-camera discussions. In the next meeting, we will continue, and you might want to take note. Mr. Sanson will have the floor for the debate on the amendment, on Mr. Sanson's amendment. Mr. Godin will be second to speak, Mr. Beaulieu third. I also have Mr. Drouin and Mr. Serret. I see no other hands raised. Okay, that's the order. Your second? I'm sorry, Mr. Beaulieu, do you have a point of order? No, I didn't quite understand. I'll repeat it. Mr. Sanson will be up on debate when we come back, then Mr. Godin, then Mr. Beaulieu, then Mr. Drouin, and then Mr. Serret. Okay? All right, good. Have a great day, people. Adjourned.